Sometimes the battlefield comes to you. I realized there was blood everywhere. This is an emergency C-section with 23 weekers, 32% survival chance. They'd taken you in, they strapped you down to the table. They had to pull the babies out by C-section, and we're on the phone with Mike, and he's like, this is the reality, Mom. They've told me that the babies have a 30% chance of survival. Everybody in this room just suddenly the pin drop. It was the fastest and slowest moment of my life. I was 1 minute sitting in my comfy bed. The next, I'm sitting on that operating table. Sometimes when God gives you an assignment or a territory, it's not one of your choosing. And you don't know true waiting on God until you're in an emergency situation where life and death hangs in the balance. I got to watch them pull up Victoria. Skinniest, tiny, literally, you know those little gray aliens you see on TV? Like that's what it looked like. It's a territory you didn't expect. It's a territory you didn't ask for. And it's a territory you don't want. And then God puts you there and he says, now you've got to fight for that territory. What shocked me was watching the spirit of death that hovered over those rooms. I saw a Grim Reaper just casually walking around the entire NICU. You're facing a war. When you take on a system, it's not a battle, it's a war. If you want to see true, effective change with your war, you have to strategize what needs to be prayed for, when, where, and how. Doctors started coming to you and say, okay, I'm ready to hear about this Jesus thing. But it is the very much the blood that was shed that qualified and validated your call to that territory, and the blood cries out. You're listening to the Apostles Digest, and I'm Colette Toch, where we give you language for your prophetic and apostolic process. And don't forget, guys, that the Apostles Digest is so much more than a podcast. It's a monthly ebook subscription. It's a monthly audio subscription. If you go to apostlesdigest.com, you can get the latest version of everything I publish for only $4.99 to you before it hits the bookshelves. Very special edition to your inbox. And so come and join that very bustling, growing community of apostles and prophets from all over the world, okay? Now, today I have a very special guest in my studio. But before I introduce her, I want to say hello to all my friends out there on the West Coast. Where are my friends on the West Coast? Because the last podcast we did was in Oklahoma City, and that was a couple of hours difference here. But this time we are in Mexico, Tijuana, Mexico, where I get the incredible opportunity to hang out with my grandbaby twins. And oh my goodness, they count up for 5 months, and they are so cute. And they're at that stage where they're chuckling and giggling, and they think that I'm absolutely wonderful. And then, of course, I've got my grandsons, Deborah-Anne and Michael's little ones, who have now realized that I am the cookie monster. And that means that I have a cookie tin fully stocked at all times. So let's just say that if there was a competition between Craig and I as the favorite grandparent, he's shaking his head vigorously, that I am most certainly in the lead. I definitely am getting the most attention. Not that it's a competition, really. But if it was, we know who's winning. Okay. So as we step into this podcast, you know, Craig and I want you to be on the cutting edge of what's going on in the body, but also what's going on in your process. Now, last week, like I said, I was in Oklahoma City with Apostle James Fortune, and we spoke about the pioneering that's taking place in the medical system. And today we are going to jump off from that with none other than my eldest daughter and tribe director of the Next Gen Prophets, and might I also add, a recent published author of The Gift of Prophecy for the Next Gen Prophets, Deborah-Anne Velthuysen. Welcome. Thank you so much for having me, for the invitation. I look forward to discussing and diving into this topic today. And it's gonna be a gritty one. I haven't said anything yet because I'm literally trying to find the words in my head on how I'm gonna present it in the punchy way that I know it is. Because sometimes God will call you to pioneer in a system, and you'll know it. Like, what Apostle James shared, how God opened the doors for him, and he saw incredible favor. God opened doors. He got involved in the stem cell therapy industry. But sometimes it doesn't happen like that with territories. Sometimes the battlefield comes to you. And this is what I want to unpack. Now, guys, I got to warn you, this is going to be a bit of a personal, this could be a very emotional story, because this is the very first time that Deborah-Anne is going public and sharing her public testimony of what happened in her labor the first time she was pregnant with twins, and how this traumatic but yet powerful experience propelled her into a battlefield to do warfare for others, and in a realm that she never asked for, didn't expect it, but yet one day woke up and realized that an assignment was at her doorstep. And so, Deborah, I'd like you to reel back to that moment when you were just 22 weeks pregnant. We were all in South Africa on a ministry trip, and I got a frantic phone call. That was an eventful night and morning. So the journey started actually 24 hours prior to that phone call, because I'd had some cramping and we were already uncomfortable. So my husband and I agreed. We said, as soon as work ends, we'll go to the emergency room. We'll get checked out. And so y'all know how these emergency rooms are. We left. I think we got to the hospital around 5 o'clock, got home at around like 12, almost 1 a.m. Because that's just how it is. They checked me out. They said, everything's okay. Nothing big deal. Everything, you're fine. Go home. But if you have any more cramping, if you have any bleeding, if you have any issues, you come back right away. And I go home, I crashed, and then I woke right awake around 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m. And I felt something was wrong. I felt uncomfortable. And so I walked my way to the bathroom, and I realized there was blood everywhere. And I didn't even register at first. I mean, it's 5 a.m. I've only gotten 4 hours maybe of sleep. And when you're pregnant, that sleep means something. And so I didn't even fully register what was happening until I'd actually got to the bathroom and sat down and realized I was cramping and there was blood everywhere. And I started freaking out. I'm like, okay. But this peace kind of settled on me. And I think that's the part that really helped me, because one of the biggest things you were telling me and the Holy Spirit was telling me throughout my pregnancy was I am not allowed to stress. From the beginning, this pregnancy was a struggle. I needed to relax. I needed to be at peace.
Because you guys battled to even fall pregnant in the first place.
That was a process. I had ovarian cysts. I had to take medication. So we only felt pregnant, 2-3 years after my diagnosis of having ovarian cysts and everything. So the fact that I was pregnant now with twins already pushes that emergency level up even more so. And so I stumbled into the room and I felt bad for my poor husband. I felt terrible. I was wrestling with this weird, okay, I need to get to the hospital, but I don't want to wake up my husband because he's sleeping so well, finally. I'm like, baby, I need you to wake up. I'm bleeding. I bled. We need to go to the hospital. And my husband, he's like, he's wide awake at this point. He's like rushing around. My sister Jessica wakes up. She's like, what's going on? What's with all the noise?
We were still at the ministry center.
Yes, we were still at the ministry center. That's about 40 minutes away from the closest hospital.
Yeah, that's right.
So already,
it's not in Descanso, yeah.
Yeah, so already we're like, okay, let's get going. And so there I was, laying in the back of that van, my husband trying to not go too far over the speed limit and get us into an accident. And I'm just laying there holding my stomach, just praying. And the thing is, I want to say I was so righteous and I was like worrying. I knew what to pray and I was doing this whole thing. But really, all I could just do was just pray in tongues. It's one thing to prepare for battle and prepare for war. And it's another thing to be on those front lines and experience the heat of an explosion going off right next to you. I trained for spiritual warfare. It wasn't like I was new to these kinds of attacks. A few years prior, I'd had a major accident with a rollover car accident, which should have claimed my life. By God's grace, we walked away with bruises and some sore muscles. That's pretty much it.
I'd had ulcerative colitis that had dropped my weight to the point of literally seeing my bones through my skin, not from lack of trying to eat. So it wasn't the first time the devil was after my life. What stressed me the most was that it wasn't my life at stake. It wasn't even just one baby at stake. I was pregnant with twins. Both of these babies' lives were being threatened. And it's one thing to pray for yourself when you're going through something, and it's another thing as a mother to know that, do I pray for myself? Because I know God could heal me.
You've seen it done.
I've seen it done. I know it is. But do I also pray for my babies?
You just don't know what to pray. You just don't know what to pray.
You don't know what to pray in that moment. You're like, how do I pray for me? Do I pray for the what? So I just laid there. I just laid there, breathing, focusing on my breathing, trying to bring my body as to peace and as fully relaxed as possible, and just praying in tongues until we got to that hospital. And I think what was the most scary about that hospital, so we get there, I kind of stopped bleeding, thank goodness, and they have you waiting in the waiting room. You're waiting. They finally let you through. They let me through pretty quick. And then you're still waiting. And this whole time you're just waiting. And you're like, I don't even know what to pray for yet.
Yeah.
Like, am I in preterm labor? Is this just the bleeding I've been having on and off throughout the pregnancy? I don't think so, because it was more. And so the doctor finally comes in. They do an ultrasound. And they're like, okay, you're in preterm labor. Prayerfully, no, you haven't dilated, but you're in preterm labor. Now we talk about options of what to do.
You know, I want to bounce off what you were just saying about we just don't even know what to pray. Now, this is what's incredible. I mean, Deborah-Anne, she's my eldest. She was literally on my knee around when I preached my very first course, wrote my very first book on the prophetic. I mean, she cut her teeth on this stuff. Like, she was sitting, you know, with me doing my teachings like this. She was the kid sitting over there. She was the first to get all my prophetic words. She was the first that, you know, all my dream interpretations, everything I practiced in the prophetic started on her.
AK-47, ladies.
Yeah, that was you. That was the Apostles' kid. That's what she calls herself, AK-47.
Rapid fire.
Oh, Lord, I didn't know what I was getting in for when I was teaching you all that stuff, girl. But anyway, as you're laying there, it's like, it's not a time to think, you know? And that's the thing when the battle comes to you, is that all of us think we know what we'll do when we face a crisis situation. But the truth is, when the crisis situation does come to you, when the battlefield comes to you, what's in you just comes out. And I think it's so powerful that what came out of you was just tongues, because the scripture tells us that the Holy Spirit gives us language, words that cannot be uttered, and groaning. But that's the first thing that came out of you, and you didn't need to think it. And I know that calm situation didn't stay there. Eventually, you went into full labor. You started dilating a couple of days later, and I got that next call of, it's happening, Mom. And I'll never forget that moment, because we're in South Africa. We're at the home. We were in between meetings. We just finished one meeting. We were going to another. First thing in the morning, and it was such a hard time to be on that battlefield there. My battlefield was my hands are behind my back. Now, as an apostle, that's the worst thing. For those of you who are apostolic, for those of you who are spiritual parents, I want to give you a bit of this side. There are times you've got to let those who are in your care go through their battles. That was the hardest battle I've ever fought. And you know why? Because I couldn't fight it. I couldn't find it in the natural. I couldn't be there in the natural. I couldn't even just keep praying, because I had to get dressed. I had to get in the spirit, and I had to go minister to God's people. We were abroad. I mean, you're talking about planning these meetings months and months. I can't just cancel on all these people.
We're on a whole different continent at this point. It's not like you're in Oklahoma up on a plane, you know?
No, we're in a whole new time zone. And so I remember when the process was going down, we got the call by then. They'd taken you in, and you can share about how that felt when they strapped you down to the table. They had to pull the babies out by C-section, and we're on the phone with Mike, and he's like, okay, they've got her in there. This is the reality, Mom. They've told me that the babies have it was something like a 30% chance of survival. A 30% chance of survival. And that's if they survive the first night. And so all we wanted after that was to hear a cry. All we wanted after that is to know, were they surviving? We sat on that line for the longest, it seemed like an hour, but it was really just 5 minutes of our lives waiting for the news and doing what we did. And you know what our language was? This was interesting because you weren't there at that time. But what happened is Craig picked up the guitar and we just began to worship. We sang our songs, we sang Warfare, and we just began to worship. And I thought, Jesus, I can't be there. You better be there. And that was how we warred. Because you see, the battlefield was coming to them. I could do nothing but stand on the outside, provide covering, and say, fight the battle well. For those apostles and leaders who are watching those in their care, face some of the toughest battles, you can give them the tools, you can give them the prayer covering, but at the end of the day, they're the ones strapped down, needing to give birth and facing their own crisis situation.
You know, when you're in that situation, there's a twofold war that goes on inside of you. Because on one hand, you know, when we got the word, this is the crazy thing about when my preterm labor water finally broke. I mean, at this point, I'd been hospitalized for about a week and 5 days. So you're not going anywhere for the duration of your pregnancy.
So we settled in, like my sisters, you know Jessica, you know Rebecca, and if you don't, well, you're about to know them. Because when they hear that you're in crisis and that you need help, they are the best support system and servants you could have. Jessica went home. She packed me so much stuff. I mean, everything. She packed me everything. She's like, you're here for the next 4 or 5 months. You are getting everything. I had bedding, clothes, makeup, nail stuff. I mean, we had whole girls' days. There was sushi, acrylic nails, gel. Like, we were doing the whole thing right there in my hospital bed. In my hospital room,
sounds like you guys.
chilling out. And it was one of the very first days that I was finally, everything was really 100% normal. And we're like all settled in for this long trip. My husband just left with the boys. They went and watched a rugby game. They're just sitting down at a restaurant to eat when he called me. I was sitting there. Something feels weird. And I went to the bathroom. I was checking for magnesium, but this just felt strange. Just call the doctor. So I'm sitting there in the bed. The nurse comes in. She's starting to check me out. I'm on the phone with him, chatting. How was your game? Oh, yeah, we're doing this. Okay. The nurse looks up. She goes, "Is that Dad on the phone?" I said, "Yeah." She's like, "You might want to tell him to get here." Everybody in this room just suddenly the pin drop. I'm like, "Babe," the nurse says, "you need to get here." He's like, "What?" It's like, she says between my legs, she's like, "Yeah, your water broke. You're in labor. He needs to get here now." My husband, it was about, I think, a 20-minute drive. My brother-in-law got him in that car. They got to that hospital in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They were there. He was like, "I ain't missing this." And it was such a frustrating moment because I knew you were at an ministry trip. I knew you were getting ready to preach. And I didn't want to tell you, actually. I did it because I know
would have been
mother.
so mad.
I know. So I'm like, at war with myself.
Mad.
Okay, I need to do warfare. I need to focus on here. But they're about to preach. So what information do I control here? Am I even supposed to control this information? I don't even remember who told you at this point. I think it was my husband And so we're sitting in labor. I was laboring for 6 hours. I put my headphones in. I didn't have my dad to play the guitar and worship with me. I just had my Christian music playlist. So I put that in and I drowned that out. And I just sat there the whole time just praying and saying, "Father, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." That's all I could pray. Your will be done on earth as heaven. And I breathed through every contraction until eventually the doctor came in, checked me out, and said, "We got to go for a C-section." It was the fastest and slowest moment of my life. I was 1 minute sitting in my comfy bed. The next, I'm sitting on that operating table. They're putting the needle in my back, and I'm numb from the waist down. And the whole time, I'm just chatting with them. You could tell everybody's nervous. I'm nervous. This is an emergency C-section with 23 weekers, 32% survival chance. But we spoke. We talked. We listened. I paid attention to my body. And then they dropped the screen and I got to watch them pull up Victoria. Skinniest, tiny, literally, you know those little gray aliens you see on TV? Like That's what it looked like. So they just yanked this thing, like little stretchy thing right up out of me. And that was it. That's how I saw her. That was it. I saw her and then she was gone. And then within 30 seconds, David comes out. And the most hardest moment was not really being able to hear them, actually. Because they were so premature, they had to immediately take them to the back, pull out the suction, and intubate them so they could breathe. And so all I got to hear was silence. I didn't know these babies were alive. Then my husband had to leave to go with the babies, and I had to lay there on that operating table, exhausted now because all the adrenaline's crashing, not knowing. Are my babies alive? Are they okay? What's going on? They roll me into recovery. And so I go to the recovery room. My husband's with the babies. My sister Jessica comes and sits with me. And the whole time I'm coming in and out of consciousness, just praying. Just like, Father, what's in heaven, manifest here on earth. Your will be done. Take care of my babies. Take care of my babies. That's it. I had no other words to pray. And it's this continual surreal experience of any minute now, something's going to happen, but I've got to also wait. I've got to wait on timing. And you don't know true waiting on God until you're in an emergency situation where life and death hangs in the balance and there's literally physically nothing you can do and wait. You mean you knew you had a plane ride, but my babies are literally right below me. And there's nothing I could do. So 2 hours, I'm laying wide awake in my bed waiting to hear, how are my babies? What are our next steps? What do we do now? What's going on? To just sit there and wait on the Lord. It is the most agonizing moment.
But that's the real battle. You know, we think of battlefields as gunfire always going off. But the kind of battles that the enemy throws against us are the coin warfare type.
Yes.
The spies sneaking in and that waiting, that silence, that not knowing, but doing nothing but standing on faith because it's all you've got.
Yep.
And I know that for every single one of us, when we got the call that the babies made it through the night, that there was hope of survival for the first time.
It was a deep breath of relief.
I think every single one of us, it was 2 days and we could get on the plane and lockdown COVID. Unfortunately, we were not able to get in and see the babies. We could at least see you before they locked the entire, because it was 2020. And they locked the whole hospital down. So, I mean, nobody in, nobody out. And so the journey began. And this is the part that I want to throw back to your listeners here, is that sometimes when God gives you an assignment or a territory, it's not one of your choosing. You know, I was saying at the beginning how I release a book for every month for our Apostles Digest subscribers, right, for $4.99. Well, this month, I'm releasing one called Apostolic Evolution. And in it, I lay out the power of the territory God's already given to you, that it's not always what you want. It's not always how you expected it to look. But if you would just stop for a minute and look at your circumstances, look at how God has led you and the process you've gone through, and look at the land around you, you would see this is your territory. But then you also have a decision to make.
Yes.
It's a territory you didn't expect. It's a territory you didn't ask for. And it's a territory you don't want. And then God puts you there and he says, now you've got to fight for that territory. And that's exactly where you guys found yourself. You found yourself in that neonatal care facility in the NICU in San Diego, surrounded with more babies than they'd ever had. This was COVID. They were running out of beds. And here you are in this crisis situation in this territory. And I want to fast forward to what this was like for you and Michael and how God actually began showing up. Not just for you, but for others right there in that NICU.
So this is the power of it. You know, I talk about all this crazy silence and like just not knowing what to pray before all this stuff happens. And two things happen when you start doing warfare. You have a moment where you have to position yourself. That was the lead up to that birth. Everything until I physically stepped foot in that NICU with surrounded by all these babies was the positioning. I had a choice to make in those moments of, am I here for myself because I needed help medically and spiritually and warfare wise? Or am I here because I'm a prophet? Am I here because I'm a minister? Because I'm a child of God and I've got power dripping off of me. I've got the blood of Jesus on me. And I'm reminded of the scripture, you know, of the story of how God told Moses to have the Israelites paint the doorposts with the blood of the lamb, the innocent lamb. And us walking through the doors of that NICU, having that shift to say, we are taking it. We are taking possession of this land because you have a choice. When God positions you in land, you have a choice. You have a choice to just do what you need to do and it's going to help you in that moment, or to take possession of that land for however much time you are positioned on it. And when we made the decision to position ourselves on that land, we painted the doorposts with the blood of Christ. Wow. Whenever we walked through those doors, whenever we walked up to the beds, when we walked past the beds, Michael and I were spiritually, we were literally sometimes raising our hands and painting blood over those little isolates, over those babies, over the doorways. Everywhere we were walking, we were putting that blood there because that spirit of death would not come here. Because that's what was happening. Well, the first time I walked into that NICU, I was surprised. I was shocked. Not at how loud it was, because that's what we were warned about. We were warned that it was going to be loud, it was going to be crazy, you're going to hear beeping and things and blah, blah, blah. And like, that's just how it is. Don't worry, you know, nothing necessarily bad's happening. Oh, so we were warned about the noise. And I live in a crazy household. So noise for me was like, eh. What shocked me was watching the spirit of death that hovered over those rooms. It was, I best described, like I saw a Grim Reaper. I saw a Grim Reaper just casually walking around the entire NICU, just checking out beds, looking at this baby, looking at that baby, just checking it all out. And that, for me, shocked me the most. Like, okay, there's death happening, there's life, there's all this crazy stuff, but to see the Grim Reaper so happy in that place of healing was what really got me. And it was like in that moment, that was the choice of, do I engage that thing? Because I knew it wasn't just like a little demon. That thing ruled that place. It owned that NICU. And if I was going to engage it, I was about to engage in a battle for true life and death, not just for me, but for everybody that entered into those doors. And you have to make a conscious decision if you're going to take that territory. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm here in this territory. That's great. Do you know what you're up against?
Come on.
Because God does give us a choice. And I'm not saying this as an out, but I want you to understand that we have a choice to take on warfare. We have a choice to take on territory. Yes, we can be destined for it. Yes, God wants us to do it, but we have free will. And if we're going to take it on, if we're going to say, yes, God, I'm going to do it, make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. Otherwise, the warfare that comes after and all the personal attacks that you receive are going to surprise you. And I was partially a little naive. I went in 100% ready. And I was aware of some of the warfare I would face, but I also underestimated the level of personal warfare that would come my way, because I didn't receive pushback and warfare from the system, which is where everybody expects it. When they start doing territorial warfare, they expect the pushback from the doctors and nurses. They expect the pushback from whatever system they're positioned in, you know, the legals and the legalities, and they're going to restrict your faith and they're going to restrict your language and how you do this. That's what they expect when they say warfare for territory. Not at all. In fact, the world is very allowing for your religion. They don't judge. They let you. If you have a religious standpoint, they will make an exception for your religion in that NICU, no matter if it goes against their policies or their moral codes. If it's your religion, it's your religious right to decide how certain medical standards proceed in that with your child. So they will make allowances for you. Where the warfare came was in my marriage. It came in my personal relationships. It came outside of all of that. They tried to distract my focus from the real battle I was facing. Because if the devil can distract you out here, you lose all power in that system.
That is just a mic drop. Because when we go for those territories, you're absolutely correct. But here's the thing, because you're destined for that territory. Come on, even Moses, You know, the elders were the ones that were giving him a hard time because the pressure was coming on them.
Yep.
His problem was always more from the Israelites because God always showed up to smite the Egyptians, right?
Yes, he did.
And it's like God showed up in that NICU, but that wasn't where your attack came from.
Nope.
It came from those personal things. And I know that that was a warfare all on its own. But I love what you said there, Deborah. I love what you said. You said they tried to distract you. That warfare tried to distract you from your assignment.
Yes.
How did you pick it up from there?
Well, I had to compartmentalize a little bit. Here's the thing. It is genuine warfare. And that's the struggle where I've seen even just people in my tribe that I've worked with, it comes in. They are genuine problems that need to be worked through, that need to be fought.
Yeah.
You're facing a war. When you take on a system, it's not a battle, it's a war. And a war is made up of multiple different defining battles that lead to the overall outcome. So if you have a certain amount of losses or a certain amount of wins, that adds to the outcome. And you're going to fight some battles in a jungle and you're going to fight some battles in a desert, but you can't fight them both at the same time. You have to fight them with the right troops, with the right strategy at the right time. And so learning to compartmentalize what demon, if you want to call it that, I was facing at what time and in what areas really helped me then develop strategy. We often see this where people come as intercessors and they just start praying for everything, right? We're going to spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and we're going to just pray for everything. And don't get me wrong, that's triage. That works. But if you want to see true, effective change with your war, you have to strategize what needs to be prayed for, when, where, and how. And I did that through the help of the Lord, of course, and then very strongly with you, my mentors and my spiritual parents, Apostles Craig as well, who really helped me compartmentalize. I had Apostle Craig, who was mentoring me in my prophetic side as my team leader. And he was, at the time, I was very upset with him. I'm going to be very straight with y'all.
Here it comes.
And there were a few times I was ready. If it wasn't COVID, I probably would have smacked him. Because there's my daughter with her bradying down. In other words, she's not breathing and they're contemplating resuscitation measures. And they're just literally, I've got a whole row of doctors and nurses just literally standing, watching her, waiting for her to decide what she's going to do. Is she going to stop breathing? Is she going to breathe? Is she just going to give up? What's going on right now? In these high tense, and I'm sitting there like just waiting, praying in tongues. Because again, there's nothing you can do in that moment. And there's my battle buddy giving me a call saying, hey, Apostle's asking why you're not in the team meeting right now. Talk about warring with your flesh. And it wasn't about me not being there for the team meeting. It was me getting out of the way because I was so locked into that
You got
moment.
fixated.
Exactly. I was fixated on that moment. I wasn't in the NICU just for me or for my daughter. I was in that NICU because I was fighting that grim reaper that had a hold on that NICU. And I was so focused on my daughter going through and everything else that I didn't notice all the doctors and nurses that God literally positioned around her bedside, ready to step in at a moment's notice.
Yeah.
What could I do?
She was covered.
She was physically, emotionally, spiritually covered. Her father was there. Everybody was there. I could not resuscitate her. I could not give her the drugs that she needed. I could literally just stand there and watch. There was nothing I could physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally do for that child in that moment. But I was so locked in by what was happening, I didn't catch that. And so him making those really hard stances, pulling me out in that environment, helped me begin to compartmentalize. I've asked you forgiveness, Apostle. I don't know if I ever walked you through and asked you forgiveness for any bitterness or resentment I held there, because I did for a while. I was like, you don't understand.
This podcast just took a turn.
That's gotta be real.
It took a turn.
In those moments, you sit there and you say, you know, because how many of you had this? Don't lie to me. You've had this where your pastor, your mentor, your apostle calls you and it seems unfair. Like, well, you don't understand. You just don't understand how hard this is for me right now, how bad this is for me right now. But you know what? Your leader in that moment is seeing, feeling, picking up. They may not understand, but they pick up something you don't. And by submitting to that and getting pulled out, I could actually come to peace. I could breathe. I could realign. And by the time I walked back into that NICU, peace. Everybody was fine. Nothing happened. She was fine. I was fine. The doctors were really shook up because my daughter, Victoria, who gave us the most trouble, she was just that
She was her mother's daughter from
She
the
was
start.
just that dramatic. See, while my boy was sitting cruising, he was sleeping, he was taking his time, he was doing fine. She was pulling out her breathing tube. She was doing all the crazy stuff that was setting everybody off. She was fine. I wasn't, though, in that moment. And so learning to compartmentalize and recognize when I'm in this environment, when I'm in this physical location, it's time for me to focus here. No matter what was going on with my husband, because Lord knows there was a lot going on in my marriage at that same time as well.
I mean, you guys are like, you've been married for a few years. You'd only been married for a couple of years. You're like still practically newlyweds at this point. It's your first pregnancy.
3 years. We'd been 3 years at this.
And facing this massive crisis. I mean, there's a lot of marriages that just don't make it. In fact, you even saw that at the NICU. There's some couples that just didn't even handle that kind of precious situation. So, I mean, in many ways, you guys were forged by fire. Is what qualifies you as the directors of the Next Gen Prophets, because in the midst of it all, you embraced the battle.
Yes.
And I know that as you confronted that Grim Reaper, things actually did happen in that NICU, didn't they? You want to talk to us about that?
So we started seeing babies go home. That in and of itself is powerful because there are babies in there that have been in there for months, weeks, some for days. That's where I want to encourage you guys. Sometimes when we're called to these systems, you get discouraged because you don't see immediate results. And I mean, I did see some miracles. I saw some people that got to go home quicker than they were supposed to. I got to see huge leaps in progress in some of those babies. And even in my own children, I got to see nurses and doctors get healing when Victoria died. You know, we made a public announcement for people to attend the funeral. And we had doctors, nurses, therapists from all parties and all departments joined that we didn't even know us personally, but they joined just because we'd invited them. And they received healing through that. And so that was like, oh, that was really cool. But then you leave. But I didn't know until about almost 3 years later, when I gave birth to my second son, what had really happened. And that's when we went back and we found out their census was incredibly low. They were having to send nurses home, they had to send people home because they just couldn't afford to keep them on because there wasn't enough patients. There was not enough sick people in the hospital or sick babies in the hospital to keep people on staff, to pay them for it. I'm seeing the incredible work of God, of the fact that that Grim Reaper didn't have dominion anymore.
Come on, he did not. What was it like walking through those halls again? You know, you shared the first time when you went into labor with the twins, that shocking reality of that spirit that hung in the air. How had it changed by the time you went back with Gabriel?
It was very quiet.
Interesting.
You know, there were still the same noises. You know, the monitors going off, which was normal. But there was just a quiet, but just the environment, the spirit as a whole was a lot quieter. I mean, people still remembered us. So that was really cool to hear the testimonies and hear from them, you know, how they were doing afterwards. But what was also crazy was a lot of the people that we connected with that first time had either been promoted, like majorly promoted through the ranks, and other people had actually left to go to better jobs. So a lot of the same people that we had connected with in that time weren't even there. And I think that, for me, was the most outstanding story to hear. Because you think, oh, I'm impacting this one little hospital. But those people we impacted went out to other hospitals.
Yeah.
As somebody who's not actually like a nurse or a medical professional that's positioned in the medical system full time, it was really hard for me to sit and say, did I really have an impact?
Yeah.
Because it was only one hospital and only one part of that hospital. Like, did I really have such an impact on the medical system as a whole? But to go back and hear that all these people that we had touched, that we knew had gone out, had been promoted, touched all these other areas, I saw the trickle of, well, the anointing that we put into them went out with them wherever they went, whether they knew it or not. And I'm talking about unbelievers here, guys. I'm not in a Christian hospital. I'm surrounded by unbelievers.
But it was such a powerful testimony. I mean, doctors started coming to you and say, okay, I'm ready to hear about this Jesus thing. How are you guys handling this? And even now, you guys have those relationships. And in fact, God has opened the doors once again for Deb and Mike to return but in a very different capacity to actually be there, to get more involved with the nurses, with the doctors, as they're plowing the field here in San Diego, California, starting their church here in this region. God is just opening those doors. And I find that so powerful, Deborah, is that at the time you guys went through this, there was no plans that you were going to start a church. I mean, you were already working with all the prophets, but at the time we hadn't handed over the next gen prophets to you. You didn't know the impact you would have in this region. And, you know, just even as I meditate on your story and I look at territories and I see what God has done, like, do you see this? You went there in a season where you didn't even know that San Diego would be your territory. And it's like God sent you into that place to deal with that spirit of death, that now as you continue plowing in San Diego, it's like you've created a fort there. You already put your, you know, your flag has already been planted in this region. And it happened in a way that nobody could possibly anticipate. And it's only when you fought for a region, it's only when you fought for a territory that you truly understand the battlefield. I know the story goes a lot deeper. We could go into, you know, that moment of having to deal with Victoria and how that was for you. I'm going to leave that for another podcast because I really want to stay focused on when the battlefield comes to you. And I also want to touch a little bit on what you mentioned about being pulled out of your situation by your apostle, because there's one thing my husband is, and it's a prayer warrior. And there's a stickler that he always was. Every single day you would get together to pray. And I want to just touch on the power of that, because you can get so fixated in your battle that he pulled you out so that you could pray with your battle buddies, realigned your perspective and armed you. Now, we can't all fight the battles for each other. But we can help motivate each other in those moments, help realign one another so that when we're sent back in, we can win that war. And that is something that I saw you and Mike do exemplary. I mean, the day we brought back David was a huge celebration at that hospital. There wasn't a single person in that hospital that didn't know your names. You prayed for every nurse. You interpreted their dreams. They came to it was outstanding. I mean, we're talking about COVID. They shouldn't have technically have even come to that gathering at our ministry center, but they did. We opened up that opportunity to be able to present the gospel to them at a time that should have broken us all as a family, as a tribe, actually became a battleground. And you know what's powerful? Whenever a battle was won, even in the Old Testament, they always put up a monument to remember. And Victoria is so much our monument to remember, not what we've lost, but the war that you won and the war you continue to fight on behalf of others. Have you got a final word for our listeners, Deborah, on their battle, on their territory where they're at today?
You know, I'm reminded of a word Apostle Craig did share with us at our summit. He got the word in regards to Victoria's death that it was the blood of the firstborn that qualified us to take the territory of San Diego. And so my final words to you, especially to you, those of you who are walking in the apostolic, is to recognize the blood that has been shed. There are many of you who have sacrificed. Let's be honest. You've sacrificed your Isaacs. You've sacrificed natural sons and daughters. You've lost maybe spouses. You've been divorced or widowed. You have sacrificed ministries. You have shed and lost a lot of blood over the years. And we sometimes walk around with the stigma of being anemic because we lost all this blood. But it is the very much the blood that was shed that qualified and validated your call to that territory. And the blood cries out. I want you to take a moment to revisit those territories where you shed blood. You know, sometimes we walk away because we believe God closed the door, and maybe he did close the door, but he had you shed blood there for a reason. And just because you've walked away doesn't mean the blood stopped crying out. Whether you know it or not, those seeds that have been nurtured by the blood that went into the soil are sprouting.
Amen.
They are bearing good fruit. So take time to celebrate the win. Take time to recognize where you have shed blood and celebrate it.
Cool, guys. This podcast took me places. This podcast took me places. Is the battle coming to you? Pick up your sword and fight. The Lord has you positioned there, not just for you, but for everybody else, all the other parents you prayed for, all the other babies you could pray through, all the other victories that you saw. It defines who you are. And as apostles, as prophets, our battles aren't pretty, but they're our battles. And they're our battles because God knows that we are equipped to fight them. This is Apostles Digest. Come and subscribe, get the latest book. Guys, you're not going to get your hands on this book until next year if you don't get the download from apostlesdigest.com. Go and subscribe. It's $4.99 a month. You can afford that for a new book every single month right in your inbox. apostlesdigest.com. Come and join the movement. God is raising up his apostles and prophets, and it's time for us to take our territories. Until next week.
You've just received a powerful impartation from Apostle Colette and guest prophet Deborah-Anne Velthuysen. To get more, go to apostlesdigest.com or join their thriving community at apostolic-network.com and come find your tribe. If you would like to find out more about Michael and Deborah-Anne Velthuysen, check out their website at www